The smell hits you first. Not the engines. You stopped hearing those hours ago. The smell. Chemical toilet, 3 feet behind your seat. The airflow pulls it forward, under the circuit breaker panel, into your sinuses. Hot hydraulic fluid. Ozone tang. And beneath it, the reek of men sealed in a metal tube at 31,000 feet for half a day. You breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. The bulkheads rattle. 4 R-3350s shaking everything in a rhythm, your bones memorized hours ago. Your flight suit is summer cotton, soft against skin. That feels wrong. Everything comfortable feels wrong right now. Something is in the bomb bay beneath you. Nobody has said what. There's a cardboard pillbox in your breast pocket. Every time the aircraft shudders, it presses against your chest. You haven't opened it. You are aboard a Boeing B-29 Silverplate. You know what that means. Every gun turret ripped out except the tail. 7,200 pounds of armor, stripped. A $500,000 machine redesigned to do one thing, carry what is beneath you. You've been told it's a special weapon. That's the phrase, special weapon. Tibbets said more at the briefing, something about atoms, about energy, but the word doesn't mean to you what it will mean to the world in 3 hours. Right now, it's just a word. You are thinking about the weight. 10 feet long, 28 inches wide, 9,700 pounds in the bomb bay, and you feel every one of them through the floor. The aircraft is sluggish, heavy in a way no B-29 should be. 140 pounds of enriched uranium packed inside a device designed to replicate the surface of the sun. That is beneath your boots, a thin floor, and 6 inches of air. The B-29 program cost $3 billion. The bomb costs $2 billion. You are paid $96 a month. Your cargo is worth more than your bloodline will earn in a century. You felt that the moment the aircraft didn't climb the way it was supposed to, the date is August 6th, 1945. Your destination is Hiroshima. What you don't know is that the city below has been watching single B-29s fly over for weeks. Weather planes, reconnaissance. Radar operators trained to ignore a lone bomber. They will ignore you too. The bomb will reach its target because the people beneath you were taught it was nothing to worry about. 6 months ago, you were in Utah, Wendover Airfield. Salt flats in every direction, no town for 50 miles, no reason for anyone to visit. The Army chose it because there was nothing around it to leak to. You learned the rules fast. You don't talk about what you do. You don't write about what you see. You don't ask why the unit patches were different, or why your mail was opened before it left the base, or why the men in Building 7 never ate in the same mess hall. You especially don't ask about the machinist who mentioned payload specifications at chow one night. By morning, his footlocker was gone, his bunk stripped, his name removed from the duty roster. They said he was transferred to a weather station in Alaska. They always said Alaska. After him, nobody asked anything. You flew practice runs, dozens of them. Single-plane missions at 31,000 feet over Japanese cities, dropping what they called pumpkin bombs, conventional casings shaped to fall exactly like the weapon you now carry. Same weight, same ballistic arc, same altitude. The point was never the damage. The point was the pattern. One bomber, no escort, no threat. You were training the enemy to ignore you. It worked. No fighters have scrambled to meet you. Colonel Tibbets picked this aircraft himself, walked the Glen L. Martin assembly line, and chose the airframe by hand. Named it after his mother, Enola Gay. He described her once as a very calm, Pacific individual. You didn't think about the word Pacific at the time. You think about it now. Before dawn this morning, a flight surgeon pulled Tibbets aside on the tarmac. You watched from the hatch. The surgeon handed him a small cardboard pillbox. You know the one? You can feel it right now, the rectangular hardness pressing against your chest through the cotton, the faint, shifting weight of 12 capsules inside when you breathe. Cyanide. If you are shot down over Japan, Tibbets is to distribute them. If anyone refuses, he is to draw his sidearm and shoot them himself. That is what you carried onto this aircraft. Not courage, permission to die, but the weapon in the belly, that is not permission. That is an order no one signed. And in 90 minutes, someone behind you is going to drop it. The man who will peer through the Norden bombsight and release the weapon over Hiroshima is asleep 3 feet behind you. He missed the briefing entirely. His name is Tom Ferebee, and in about 90 minutes he will kill 80,000 people. Right now, he is dreaming. Tibbets is 29, $333 a month. You watch him and you see nothing. That is the point. He does not fidget. He does not pray. He named this aircraft after his mother because she was the calmest person he ever knew, and he believes calm is a technology. The math is simple to him. An atomic strike kills tens of thousands. A mainland invasion kills millions. He chose the smaller number. He will sleep fine tonight. The aircraft hits a pocket of turbulence, and the floor drops 3 inches. Your stomach follows. The pillbox in your breast pocket shifts against your chest. Lewis is different. Your co-pilot. The man who should be flying this aircraft and knows it. Tibbets took command 3 days ago. Lewis drinks in the enlisted men's club when the officers' bar is closer. Wears your radar operator's jacket because he lost a bet and never gave it back. When an MP at Wendover shot Schumard's dog, Lewis's rage was the kind that doesn't stop until someone is smaller. He took that MP apart in front of the barracks, word by word, until the man couldn't look up. Every enlisted man on base remembered it. He doesn't know it yet, but in 5 hours he will write 6 words in a flight log that will outlast everything else on this aircraft. Right now, he is checking fuel gauges. It is 02:45 Tinian time. The engines devour the coral runway. What happens inside this machine over the next 6 hours will be the most expensive poker game ever played. Everyone at the table. Cards dealt. No one folds. 02:45. Tibbets stands on the throttles. Not pushes, stands. He walks them differentially, left hand correcting, right hand correcting, keeping the nose wheel pinned to the crushed coral center line, while 4 R-3350s scream at maximum power. You know the reputation. Everyone knows the reputation. These engines catch fire on heavy takeoffs, spontaneously, without warning, without apology. And tonight, the aircraft is heavier than it has ever been, and what is sitting in the belly does not forgive engine fires. 155 miles per hour. The entire 8,500-foot runway consumed. The airframe shudders so hard your teeth ache. Then the shuddering stops. You are airborne. You are not relieved. You are just afraid of something different now. 0320. Captain Parsons unstraps from his seat. He opens the forward bomb bay hatch and lowers himself into the dark. The bomb bay is unpressurized. It is freezing. The aircraft is shaking. He is climbing down to the weapon, to Little Boy, with a toolkit and a set of explosive powder charges, and he is going to arm it by hand. He is doing this now, mid-flight, at 6,000 feet. Because the alternative was worse. If the weapon had been armed on the ground and the engines had caught fire on takeoff, the detonation would have vaporized the entire Tinian airbase. Parsons chose to arm it in the air with his bare hands rather than risk arming it on the ground. You listen to the sounds beneath the floor. Metal scraping, a wrench turning. The careful mechanical clicks of a man assembling Doomsday, 6,000 feet above the Pacific. He finishes. He climbs back up. He says nothing. The weapon is live. Somewhere beneath your boots, a clock is now running. 0607, Iwo Jima. The Enola Gay meets two other B-29s, the great artiste and necessary evil. 3 bombers in formation. The exact doctrinal profile the Japanese have been conditioned to dismiss. You trained them to ignore this. Now you are counting on it. 0730. Tibbets breaks the drone. His voice comes through the interphone flat, clinical, stripped of ceremony. We are carrying the world's first atomic bomb. Silence. The word atomic sits in the cabin like a new passenger. For the enlisted men, the ones they call the Mushroom Club, kept in the dark and fed manure, this is the first time the scale lands. You are not carrying a big bomb. You are carrying something that has never existed before. You sit with that for a moment. Nobody speaks. Then someone picks up the cards. The poker game fills the transit. Tibbets plays. Ferebee plays. Van Kirk plays too. On takeoff, he cradled his sextant like a newborn, both hands around the brass, knuckles white, bracing not for himself but for the instrument that would guide the weapon to its target. You sit in the pressurized tunnel, a narrow, vibrating aluminum corridor connecting the forward and aft cabins, and you shuffle and wager fractions of your monthly pay. Ferebee is winning. He woke up 20 minutes before takeoff, missed the briefing, got the short version, said nothing. 26. Farm boy from Mocksville, North Carolina, tried out for the Boston Red Sox, didn't make it, became a bombardier instead. His hands are steady. They will be steady over Hiroshima too. Ferebee can put anything in a box and close the lid. You've never seen him not calm. It unsettles you more than the turbulence. Behind everyone, Karen faces backward. The only man on this aircraft watching where you've been, not where you're going. Staff Sergeant, Brooklyn, $96 a month. He is wearing a faded Brooklyn Dodgers cap that has no business being at 31,000 feet. Before boarding, someone handed him a handheld Fairchild K20 camera. Almost an afterthought. The automated cameras on the observation planes will fail. This enlisted man's snapshots will become the only surviving photographs of what happens next. He doesn't know what he's about to photograph. None of you do. Nobody on this aircraft knows what happens when it detonates. 98.6% of the uranium inside that casing will do nothing. It will scatter, inert, wasted. The bomb is almost a failure. But that remaining fraction, barely more than 1%, will be enough. Enough to burn a human silhouette into stone steps. Enough to sear a ladder's outline into a wall. You will see the photographs later. You will not believe they are real. Right now, you are looking at your cards. Below you, something is happening that you will never see. A lieutenant on Mount Futaba is watching a lone B-29, the weather plane that flew this route an hour ago. He tracks it. He watches it bank. He watches it leave. He sounds the all clear and orders breakfast for his gunners. Rice, soup, pickles, stewed vegetables. Streetcars are filling. School children are walking in lines. 1 hour from now, you will arrive in the same sky, and the defenses will be down. You are 40 minutes behind that weather plane. You are the thing they stopped worrying about. 091417. Ferebee flicks a toggle. A piercing, high-pitched radio tone floods every headset on every aircraft in the formation. It replaces all human sound. There is no voice. There is no static. There is only the tone, cold, electronic, mechanical, screaming at a frequency designed to be impossible to ignore. It lasts exactly 60 seconds. Nobody speaks. Nobody moves. The cards are still on the floor of the tunnel where someone dropped them. You count the seconds without meaning to. You lose count. You start again. The tone stops. The silence afterward is louder than the engines. Louder than anything you've heard in 12 hours of flight. Then, the pneumatic hiss and metallic clack of the bomb bay doors snapping open beneath your feet. The floor drops away. Wind screams upward through the gap. You are standing over the sky. 091515. Ferebee, the farm boy, the failed ball player, the man who slept through the briefing and won the poker game, looks through the Norden bombsight and says 2 words, "Bomb away!" The aircraft lurches. 9,700 pounds gone in an instant. The nose leaps upward, violent, stomach lurching. And Tibbets and Lewis wrestle the yokes forward together, fighting the sudden lightness, preventing a stall. Then Tibbets banks. Not gently. He throws the bomber into a 155-degree diving turn, so brutal the G-forces pin you into your seat and keep you there. The aircraft plunges 2,000 feet. Your stomach is somewhere above you. The angle is not instinct, it is geometry. A standard turn would sweep the wide-turning B-29 too close to the blast radius. The 155 aligns the narrowest possible profile, the tail, toward whatever is about to happen behind you. You are running from your own weapon. 43 seconds. The bomb falls in silence. No one aboard can see it. No one aboard can hear it. It is simply gone, tumbling through 6 miles of empty air toward a city that sounded the all clear an hour ago. Karen in the tail, Dodger's cap, and borrowed camera is the only man facing the right direction. He watches. He waits. Everyone waits. 09-1602, 1,968 feet above Hiroshima. 15 kilotons. The flash whites out the Polaroid glasses you were ordered to wear. 11.5 miles away, the shockwave finds you. It does not rumble. It does not boom. It sounds like a giant piece of sheet metal snapping right beside your ear, the same metallic rattle the bulkheads made on Takeoff. The same rattle you've been hearing for 12 hours, amplified into something that has no second occurrence. The aircraft is slapped upward. A second shockwave, the ground echo, slams into you moments later. Someone shouts, "Flak!" before the word dies in his mouth. The concussion is not enemy fire. It is yours. Karen raises the K-20. The automated cameras have failed, exactly as predicted. At every frame this man in the Dodger's cap shoots becomes the only surviving photograph of what a single bomb did to a city of 350,000 people. He will later describe what he sees through the viewfinder, a bubbling mass of purple-gray smoke. Lewis uncaps his pen. In the mission log, in handwriting that slopes downward across the page, he writes 6 words. "My God, what have we done?" You don't know it yet, but Lewis's 6 words will outlive every commendation on this aircraft. Karen's borrowed camera will end up in the Smithsonian. The aircraft beneath you will sit in pieces for decades because no one can agree on what it means. Right now, none of that exists. Right now, you are watching Tibbets's hands on the yoke, and his hands are perfectly still. On the tarmac at Tinian, a ground crew is already rolling a second weapon toward a waiting B-29 called Boxcar. A crew you will never meet is checking their flight suits. Someone is palming a poker chip. The pattern is restarting.